Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Mayor's Institute. We're glad you joined us for this fifth session of the 2022-2023 curriculum. My name is Darian Vason with the African American Mayors Association. And to start our session today, it is my honor to introduce Phyllis Dickerson, Chief Executive Officer of the African American Mayors Association.
Well, thank you, Darian. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. As CEO of the African American Mayors Association, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to ALMA's Mayors Institute for Racial and Economic Justice Policy. We are excited to partner with the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation for this year's Institute. This is the third year of the first of its kind Racial and Economic Justice Policy Institute. We focus on critical learning opportunities for mayors and their teams. Today's discussion will focus on mayors getting the funds they need for their projects under the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. This session will also provide you insight on crafting strong grant applications to get the funding for your project. With the new influx of infrastructure investment projects across the nation, ALMA feels it's timely to discuss this matter. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and welcome any feedback. Back to you, Darian.
Thank you. Today we have Andrea Frazier, Vice President with AECOM's Program and Project Management Business Sector, Aaron Singer, an experienced infrastructure development and investment professional, and is currently responsible for the ongoing development of the Fund Navigator tool. And last but not least, Amy Ford, who leads surface transportation and innovation for the global transportation business at AECOM. They will lead us in a demo presentation detailing AECOM's Fund Navigator tool. So please welcome Andrea, Aaron, and Amy to the Mayor's Institute.
Thank you, Darian, and good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Andrea Frazier, and I'm with AECOM, and I'm here with my colleagues, Aaron Singer and Amy Ford. And so I know we have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to turn this over to Aaron Singer, who is going to take you through a quick demo of one of the tools that we've developed to help our clients around navigating the IIJA bill, as well as matching priority projects with available funding. So I'll turn that over to you now, Aaron.
Great. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much. I am excited to be here and share this tool that we've been working on with all of you. And so let's just see, I'm accustomed to Teams, so let's see if I can convert over to Zoom quickly and share with you our tool. I'm just going to dive right in. Let's see. I'll start off with our home screen. How about that? How's that? Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll just talk for a couple minutes and then dive in and show you. So we have this tool called the Fund Navigator. And currently right now it covers the 400 plus funding programs that are captured in the bill in the infrastructure in IIJA. And I'll just note that we are we're just a few weeks away from now incorporating the Inflation Reduction Act in this as well. We created this tool both for internally as we were trying to get our heads around what is a really complex bill with the 2,600 pages and the over 400 different funding programs, so that our folks could get to know quickly what was in this bill. And then also realize that this could be quite helpful for our clients. And so we have two modules that are active right now, and then the third that we're working on. So the two that are active right now within the Fund Navigator is the Fund Explorer. And after this, we're happy to send a link to everyone so that you can just go ahead and get access to the Fund Explorer. And then we have the Fund Matcher. So the Fund Explorer is essentially one-stop shopping for all the publicly available information that's out there today. If you're getting notifications around webinars and notice of funding opportunity and new guidance and all of that, it can be quite overwhelming. And the federal government has done an amazing job of getting ready and getting these funds out the door because they had to hire so many people and establish so many of the the new rules around what is truly an unprecedented number of discretionary grant programs at the federal level. So the name of the game changes a bit, right? When you've got all this federal money to chase in a way that in the past has been maybe, especially on the transportation side, distributed more as a formula. So this tool, we hope, offers a way to essentially navigate those 400 different funding programs quickly. The Fund Matcher, that's the side of the tool that has that uses a bot and that uses geospatial analytics. I'll get in that in a moment, but let me just show you the Fund Explorer really quickly. You guys still there? I can still see it? Okay. So again, publicly available information all in one place. We're on the cusp of incorporating Inflation Reduction Act as well as the omnibus information from the end of the year. You just select a category to slice and dice. So on the left here, these categories came from that White House guidebook that came out about a year ago and has been subsequently updated. And what was great about that guidebook is we got a lot of intel around the timing of when these things would come out. So I just picked a category, electric vehicles. You see on the right that the list of the funding programs updated. And then you can select agency, you can select funding mechanism. Let's say we're only interested in the competitive grants. And again, it updates on the right. If you select one of these, then the information around the funding program description, the eligible uses, whether or not it's an existing legacy program or a new one, the funding mechanism, information we might know around appropriations. Of course, having the money appropriated makes the program a lot more real. And then the recipients and, if relevant, the subrecipients. So all that information, along with any intelligence we have around the dates, the relevant dates, all in one place. You also have URL links that take you to fact sheets back to the federal government's websites, as well as to grants.gov in the case we're looking at competitive for the notice of funding opportunities. So just that idea of putting it all in one place, and it's a tool that we offer. There's no charge associated with this tool. It is, as I mentioned, the publicly available information. One other thing I think that's pretty cool about it is if you want to put in something like the word mobility, as you see here on the right, you put in that word and you get a quick, across all of the 400 different funding programs, when does the word mobility pop up? And so it's another way of just quickly looking at the information. So let me now I'm going to take you over to a demo of the Fund Matcher. Now, just very quickly, this one is using an AI bot, and it's pretty basic in its screening, if you will. We're just looking at words and comments. So words in a project description, and so it can be early in a project where you're thinking about exactly what will be included in that project. You can do a quick preliminary scan across the 400 programs and see what of your project description matches of the funding program and the eligible uses of the funding programs. And so I'm just going to give you an example here. Okay, so this is a demo project. And this particular project is focused on road safety. Yeah, let me bring you in here. Oops. I have a menu popping up. And all right, you guys see that?
We can.
Okay, great. So so this is just a made-up project, and we've it's focused on road safety and multimodal improvements. And so we've populated it with a couple of categories that focus on, of course, safety. There could be a resilience element to this as well, and roads, bridges, and major projects carries over from those categories that I mentioned earlier. And if you go into the details, so you saw the ABC. So the concept there is we're all familiar with the 3.0, the 4.0, the A's, the B's, the C's from grade school. So we thought that this was a effective way of communicating just how well the match was in the end. On the left-hand side of the decimal place, that's about eligibility. So if as a direct recipient, are you passing the eligibility thresholds? If there's like a geographic requirement, or perhaps that it's the program is set up for rural applicants. That's the left-hand side. So as you get closer to your A, that means you're passing those various thresholds. But we've kept visibility to the C's because perhaps you could partner with someone where maybe as the direct recipient, you're not eligible, but your a fellow locality might be. And so you could partner and then open up your access to other funding opportunities. So we still offer visibility to that. On the right-hand side of the decimal place, so you see these scores right in here, you have the results of the bot match. And so of course, the better the score, the better the match. Again, just fundamentally looking at words in common. And so here you have it, the safety program, it goes straight into, all right, your top two being highway safety and then safe streets for all. It could be planning, could be construction. So offers you a couple of different options here. And then if you click on that one, then of course that same information that you had under the Fund Explorer is populating down here. To get to an A, essentially you're identifying manually that is the one that you want to chase and monitor. And you can export your A's, CSV or PDF. And then the other neat thing about this is that as the funding information is updated, which we do update this regularly, then the scores will be updated as well regularly. So you're able to monitor, if you will, that match without having to give it any effort and without having to really chase that information. And so let me just come back to the other side of this, which is the geospatial. And here we have, so we're using the same data set that is part of the CGIST, the screener, and we're offering just a quick visualization with this. The whole thing is intended to be preliminary and to allow folks to jump past all the data collection and following of the information and jump straight into strategy. And so the idea here is we take a latitude and longitude of every project and then a radius around that project, which is a proxy. Maybe that zone of impact makes sense. Maybe if it's wastewater treatment plant or something, but if it's a long corridor, you know, whether that's rail or highway or anything, perhaps your zone of impact is different. But nonetheless, this offers you a very quick way to just visualize where your project sits relative to what, as per this data set from the Council on Environmental Quality, and per the 8 components that it's tracking, how your project sits geographically within the census tracts and what those census tracts, how they score relative to those 8 components. And so if you're looking at maybe 5 different projects and they're all eligible for raise, but only one of them is showing up in a zone that will give you a good story to tell around how your project, assuming the project is indeed addressing this, is providing benefits to a historically disadvantaged community, then that helps you realize that that one project is probably going to be your most competitive relative to Justice40. So again, a quick way of just being able to evaluate your projects from a portfolio perspective, and not have to spend your efforts, if you will, tracking down the information. And so with that, I'm just going to pause and see if my colleagues wanted to jump in and add anything.
No, I'll just add one comment to the group. We know that there is a lot moving with IIJA. You know, myself, I am the one who sort of corrals a lot of the efforts that an AECOM does, where we work with clients and cities and state agencies all around the country in supporting and helping people do this. And I think, you know, the part of this discussion is really about how do you cut through the complexity and the so muchness, if you will, of IIJA, and how do you make it so that you all leave not one stone unturned, not $1 on the table in regards to how you can tap those funds, and frankly, how you make yourself as competitive as you possibly can be. And, you know, so tools like this and other advice and insights that you gather as your team members put your programs together is an important piece to that. You know, not every city has large staffs and teams. We were in a session a little while ago with the Democratic Mayor's Caucus, and Mayor Adams, New York City, was talking about his, you know, entire department who is focused solely on how do you tap these funds and how do you work through federal funding. And not everyone always has those kinds of resources. And so I think that, you know, some of these pieces that are allowed to allow you to move those forward are designed to, you know, again, help you take advantage of these dollars that really have the transformative power in reshaping the infrastructure in your cities, and, you know, concepts of equity and access, and accomplish the goals that you're looking towards. So we appreciate the opportunity to just sit and chat with you all about it all, and happy to answer any questions.
Right.
And happy to hear thoughts of what your challenges are as well.
Exactly.
Hey, you guys, I'm going to ask a couple of questions while the mayors put their questions in the chat or staff. Well, how helpful has the Fund Explorer been in matching funds to projects? And do you all track the number of projects that actually receive funding based on the fund matcher?
Yeah, I'll take that. So we are just getting to the point where we're starting to hear, if you will, the results of some of the competitive grants. So if you will, we're almost to the end of a cycle where we've been assisting. Does that make sense? Where we've been assisting clients in chasing, determining, if you will, the grants to chase, and awaiting the responses. So I think we do have a number of clients where, and we're happy to give references where we've helped them with strategy, but we're not at a point where that strategy is actually led to a grant that has been applied to, that has been heard back from, to be able to speak to the success. So it's really around strategy right now.
Perfect, perfect. And so can someone from your team put the access to the tool in the chat? Someone just asked for that.
Yeah.
And then do you guys provide technical assistance for the tool, for the Navigator?
We do. So we can do this demo and a little bit more. This has been a very quick version of it, but we can certainly spend time and take folks through. We do that all the time. And we want it to be useful. We also take feedback because we're constantly updating the tool. In fact, with the incorporation of the Inflation Reduction Act, we're going to update the user interface as well. And anyone that's accessing the tool will just see those updates. And we plan to reach out to make sure that people understand those updates.
Now, is the entire tool free or one component of it? And the part that's not free, how much is it? And is there a discount to municipalities?
Yeah, so the Fund Explorer is the free part. And the Fund Matcher, it is not software as a service. AECOM does have other tools that are done that way, but this is really just, if you were working with us for grant strategy, this is one of the tools that gets used for that as well. And so you would have access to not just see the Fund Explorer, but any of your projects. So specific to your client, you won't see other clients' information. Of course, everyone's information is confidential. So you'll see your projects in the Fund Matcher, and it's just done through consulting hours with us. There's no additional fee, if you will. Okay.
And someone for your team, Amy, or someone, can you put the link to the tool in the chat for everyone? Are there any more questions for the mayors or staff on the call?
Yes, I have a question, Phyllis.
Mayor Matt, go ahead.
Yes. So I'm not clear if this is a tool that you, the African American Mayors Association, is making available to member mayors, or if this is a sales pitch. Can you help me out with that? It seems very interesting, and it appears to be a tool that member municipalities can certainly use, but how do we access this information?
So I'm going to give you a link and you'll be able to access it right away. The form that with the link, there's a Microsoft form where you basically say your name, your email address, and where you work. You can click some interest. And the reason that we're collecting the interest is that we're setting up notifications. We're not quite there yet, but we're going to have notifications go out per your interests that you can opt in and out of. But nonetheless, it's that simple of a form. And then once you've clicked it, you get access automatically .gov.org or automatically getting access. There's no engagement of any sort.
And Mayor Matt, maybe I'll answer this question. You know, we and Andrea has been talking with Phyllis, and we wanted to team with the African American Mayors Association and actually be able to provide this tool to you. And Phyllis's discussion is how do we create some, you know, additional member benefits and access, especially as we work to try to tackle these issues of IIJA and sort of the opportunities that are there. And so she was, you know, kind enough as we partner together to sort of bring this to you all. And yeah, it does come across as there's a secondary piece on how you sort of dig into these and really get going into grant applications and that kind of thing, and potential partnerships, you know, with us, with AECOM. And so recognize that it sort of crosses the line on both, to be honest, to answer your question. But this is an opportunity that we wanted to partner with you to be able to provide this tool and partner with the association. So Phyllis, I don't know if you wanted to add into any of that sort of a member benefits.
Yeah, and Mayor Map, we also, when you hear the other presenters, you'll see how it all goes together. But more than anything, as a former mayor's chief of staff, I know nobody in city government has time to look through all those grants to figure out which ones your projects qualify for. So this is a way to kind of streamline and cut through the project. If you want to use it, just drop your description into the tool, and then it at least cuts through the chase of trying to run down which grant you qualify for. And then from there, you can go offline and do what you want to do. But this at least gives you a jump start.
Question.
Yes, Dr. Smith.
Yeah, I have a question for the team. I represent the National League of Cities, and so one of the things that we're doing, you know, I'm located in Jackson, Mississippi, originally from the Mississippi Delta. If people are familiar with that, very rural, and so I guess the question that I was asking is how realistic, and I'm looking at the tracker, and I know that we brought up the issue of how much would it cost in order to utilize the service, and just want to kind of give give everyone a realistic of some of the challenges that we're facing. You know, we're working with several cities that lack a lot of the resources, and in one particular city, their total operating budget is under $500,000. Okay, that's to pay for and we just been real. The chief of police, all of the essential services. So just having said that and premise that, I just want to make sure that this is a realistic tool that we can vet out to the folks that are in the Mississippi Delta and other areas that are not astute with some of the other things in some of the larger cities. And I know for a fact that that's going to be an issue with some of the local politicians there, and especially the citizens that are in the Mississippi Delta, Greenville, Cleveland, Belzoni, other areas like that. So I just want to throw that out. I just want to make sure that that will be a viable option, if for those citizens that are in those types of rural areas.
I mean, I would say yes. Ultimately, I'll be direct. Like, AECOM wants to see these projects move forward. We're designers at the end of the day. So with this project, I mean, this tool we developed, as I mentioned in the beginning, both internally for us to get familiar with it, because it's in our interest to help our clients come up with the funding to solve that funding problem so that the projects move forward, because we're designers. So I hope that frankness at least explains our interest. This tool, the first half of it is absolutely free. It is a we don't publicly advertise it. We reach out to certain industry associations and partners to offer it. And then we also offer it directly to our clients. On the engagement, on the bot side of it and the geospatial tool side of it, we've done very low cost workshops. So we'll take a capital plan and run it through the tool. That has, you do need some folks that are familiar with the projects to chat, to be there to talk through. It's not just this exit on this interstate, but it's actually got, maybe it's on an evacuation route, or there's a resiliency element to it, or reconnecting communities element to it, economic development, because those are the policy objectives that the funding programs have been set up for. And so it's the project description needs to address that. And so in those workshops, we talk through it. So it's important to have the people that know the projects so that we can make this tool effective. And then it's a quick scan. And you can check in. We suggest every quarter. Grants are one source of funds, but it's not the only thing that everyone's looking at. So, but to see how it updates. So we have done some very low cost workshops, and then we spend a few hours with our clients. So,
And Dr. White, I'm sure you're to say, okay, let's be realistic. What's low cost? What's that really mean? You know,
sure.
so we're talking like $10,000, something in that range. So,
Okay.
that is, bring us your capital plan. You've got hours of our grant specialists and our team members and working through that. So in that 10-ish range, depends. If we're talking a big city and you've got a lot of stuff and a lot of projects, that takes you up to about, let's say 50 projects or so. I'm just ballparking here, but you know, be frank about that part of it. So yeah. So
and that was my initial concern.
It's a totally fair question because
at NLC, we have the Federal Navigation Program, we have cities with millions and millions of dollars. Now we focus on those cities in the South, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, that do not have the infrastructure designed to do that. And so, you know, in doing that, I just want to be realistic when we get ready to come to talk to the folks, because most of the time, you know, we meet these folks where they are. You know, their concerns is, hey, you know, I want a grant to just pay somebody to cut the grass. You know, that's an issue. You know, you got a mayor that's making less than $30,000. You see what I'm saying? One chief police. So I just want to make sure that when we sit down and have these kind of conversations, that we're not comparing apples to apples, or apples to oranges, or grapes or pineapples or what have you. That this is something that we could utilize even at that level. And I think, and like I said, being born from the Mississippi Delta, I understand the challenges, especially with a lot of the African mayors and things that they're having to double up on resources just to get things that they need, essential things that they need. So yeah, that was my question. Glad you answered.
great.
Thanks, everyone. And just remember, this is just a tool that is open for you to use, just to put your project description in this out and look at the scoring, and maybe you need to make it more robust. And if you want to use the tool, it's available. If you don't, then there's no cost to you to, you know, to just to put your description in the tool and see what it says. Darian, you want to move to the next presenter?
Yes, and thank you all. That was a wonderful presentation from AECOM. Next, we welcome our partners for the National League of Cities, Dr. Marva Smith and Dr. Fred White, who will lead us in a presentation detailing how to create a robust grant application for mayors to get the funding they need for projects under the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. Dr. Smith is an Alabama state consultant with the Strong Southern Communities Initiative through the National League of Cities. As a state consultant, she provides municipal leaders with analytical support, best practice guidance, partnership development, and establish positive client relationships. Dr. Frederick White is the Federal Grant Navigator Consultant for the Strong Southern Communities Initiative through the National League of Cities, and he also conducts grant training workshops to administrators, elected officials, and educational leaders on proposal development and grant compliance. Please welcome Dr. Smith and Dr. White to the Mayor's Institute.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having us today. I am going to jump right in because I am definitely mindful of everyone's time on today. So my name is Dr. Marva Smith, and we are going to present just briefly some tips that we have learned, not just based on our experience from the southern cities as well as some Midwest cities. So this is just a brief overview. If you need further information, you can always contact us. So some of those quick tips that we'll review today. Review the grantor's website. We cannot stress that enough. Read the NOFO. I know sometimes it's 98, it's 100 pages, but it's imperative. Create a checklist, develop a team, watch the grant webinars, ask questions. There's never a silly question, and utilize additional resources. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Fred White, who will talk to us about the grantor's website as well as the NOFO.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Smith, and to reiterate the issue of time, and these are just some similar things that we wanted to kind of bring to mention. In meeting with some and working through NLC and meeting with some of the cities, one of the things that we encourage a lot of the city officials to do is look at the webinars. Most of the funding that's out there, either after the application has been posted, many of the federal agencies will include webinars, and those are important to look at. And the webinars will tell you who, what, when, and how. A lot of times about the applications, give you a robust knowledge of what contained in the application and some of the do's and don'ts. So we request that you utilize the webinars. Also, many funding agencies out there will include a funding calendar. And the funding will come down, especially through grants.government and other portals. And we urge many city, all of the city officials to look at the funding calendars, to look at when the funding is coming. And these documents will provide you a calendar of when certain funding opportunities will be posted. And so we suggest that you get familiar with the funding calendar as well. Also, previous awards. I tell people all the time that cities that I'm working with all the times. Sometimes it's best to go out there on the internet and just to see, look at previous awards that were given. Most funding agencies will provide a section on previous grants that have been funded from the year prior. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to go out there and look at those, just to get a sense of the language, how different organizations constructed their proposals. Because the whole idea that you want to do is you want to get the upper edge, and you have to think in your mind too that the funding agency may or may be familiar with your organization. So you want to make sure that you do your homework and make sure that you prepare, that you are able to submit the best application possible. Also and many of you know this as well, when you go to the particular website, say for instance, if you're looking for something in the Department of Education, and there's an opportunity out there as well, they would also have a frequent ask questions section of that. Many of the questions that you'll probably want to ask about the particular application, the NOFO, or the request for funding may have already been asked and answered. So I suggest that you go to the frequent FAQ section just to see and look out there and to see if there are any questions that may be burning in your mind at the particular time that may have been already answered and provided an answer to. And the whole idea of doing this is to make sure that you do your preparation up front and do your homework when you go in and looking at applications. Resources, this is very important too. When you're looking at resources, there again, there's a lot of grant databases, search engines and things out that way. In fact, we had a very good presentation a moment ago about tracking and looking at those opportunities and sifting through the many opportunities. Because like it was said this morning, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of opportunities that are out there. So you can't effectively spend all of your time out there searching and doing internet searching for grant opportunities. So you want to make sure that you subscribe to the necessary databases that's going to support your particular organization. The last thing is contact information. This is what I tell people all the time. You want to make sure that you get familiar with the person who is responsible for the program contact and the application. So what I tell people all the time, a lot of this is basically relationship building. And there again, the organization, the people who are making the decisions at the organization, may not be familiar with your organization. So a lot of times what I do, I'll call and just pose a question. And I pose that question just only to make sure that the person that I talk to is familiar with me and familiar with the organization. And in many instances, it has proved to be very helpful in building relationships. Dr. Smith, next slide, please. Now, this slide is read the NOFO. What we do at NLC is a little bit different when we're meeting with cities, especially those cities who are in the rural areas that I mentioned earlier. What we do here, we take that NOFO summary that city is interested in. And what we normally do is, and one of the duties of the state navigator and the federal navigator is that we take that 120-page notice of funding opportunity, and we break it down into 2 or 3 pages. And in those pages, we give you the who, what, when, how, and why. Because many of the cities that we meet with, the mayors are busy, especially in these rural areas, and they don't have a lot of time. They spend most of the time administrating. So we try to make it as simple as possible. And like we said earlier, we try to meet them where they are. And so what we normally do is we do the NOFO summaries, and we provide them with who's eligible, how much it is, the ineligible amounts and things like that, the matching requirements and things of that nature, so they would know up front. Once we do that, then we have them to take that, we give them a sort of homework essentially, and tell them to build their concept around the information that they've received in the NOFO summary. Then after that, we have a sit-down meeting, and that's when we sit down and discuss how we're going to move forward with the particular projects. Also, in NLC, they have what you call an infrastructure hub, which is another resources that cities can link into that is free of charge, that will have NOFO summaries, trainings, and things of that nature that will assist the cities and getting up to par and preparing them to sit down and talk about some of their needs regarding an application. But like I said, again, once we meet with the cities, we talk about who's eligible, we talk about the funding amounts, the match requirements. And most of the times when we have these sit-down meetings with these cities, we will know after we've had this conversation with them that this is a project that they're wanting to pursue. And so what we try to do in an effort, instead of us just sitting down and talking to the cities, we do these summaries so we can have them to have a dialogue with us so they can begin to craft their idea of what they want to achieve in a particular application. Dr. Smith, thank you.
Dr. Smith, you're on mute.
You're on mute, can hear you.
Thank you, Dr. White. So these 5 items that we have here in terms of the NOFO, these are kind of the 5 main things that you want to look for when you are looking through the NOFO. So this is a way for you to better understand how to read a NOFO so that you're not sifting through a lot of the information that you don't need to just determine whether it is the right grant for you.
Yeah, and you're right. And also, when we do prepare the summaries too, I forgot to mention, we also put the page number in the NOFO where we found the information. So at a later point, if you want to go back and say, oh, did I miss the eligibility? In that summary, it would say, we'll go back to page 7 of that NOFO to help you as well.
The next thing we encourage you to do, once you've been able to look at that NOFO, is to create a checklist. The first thing you want to do, and this is the first thing, we have had cities that are looking to apply for grants and they have not registered on grants.gov and sam.gov. If you are a mayor, if you are a municipal leader who has not registered on grants.gov and sam.gov, you should do that today. Just do it today, start the process if you are even thinking about applying for any federal grants. The other thing is identify your eligibility, identify the application requirements, and identify these sources of information. And then you want to develop a timeline for early submission. You always want to give yourself at least a week. So your timeline should be a week before the actual deadline of the grant. And this is just an example of what that checklist may look like. So of course, registering for SAMS.gov and grants.gov.
Where's your source? Where can I get this information? And who is the person that's going to be responsible? And as you can see in this example, there are several sources of information that are on the federal website. If there are questions that you specifically have, we work with cities one-on-one. So we go through with you and assist you in creating this checklist. So it's not something that you have to do by yourself. But once you create this checklist, you're better able to move forward with the application. What we want to do as consultants is make this the simplest as possible. Some additional tips. We've talked a little bit about this. You want to assess your city's capacity. We understand that funding is necessary for cities to run, but we want you first to really focus on what are your priorities as a city. If you have that city plan, that's a 5-year plan, identify the people that are going to be responsible. And then what are those people's current responsibilities? And would they be able to handle additional responsibilities? Connect with resources. We cannot stress it enough. To strengthen your application, connect with the resources that are available. And a lot of these resources are free. The Strong Southern Communities Initiative is completely free. The services of myself, as well as Dr. Fred through NLC, are also free. They have state, regional, and local organizations that are within your own cities and states that may be able to assist you. They may not be able to write the grant for you, but they may be a source to locate the data that you need. They may be a source to help draw out some mapping. It's always good to know what may be right under your nose. As Dr. Fred mentioned, there's the local infrastructure hub. That's another free source that is through NLC in partnership with the Bloomberg Foundation. So there are so many ways. And the local infrastructure hub provides boot camps for various grants throughout the year. And we can't stress this enough. Partnerships are strength. Sometimes it may be necessary to partner with your peer cities. Don't be afraid to join with that neighboring city of yours on a grant application. It is important, and it is actually something that grantors look for. They really like the idea of partnerships now. So it is really important, particularly in cities and dealing with infrastructure. If a road is going through your town, it's probably going through another city. So why not partner on that city to get additional funds to make sure that those that are traveling through, they're able to have a smooth ride from your town on to the next. Consider a grant writer or at least a grant expert. You can find them online, you can find them through NLC, and then consider maybe hiring a consulting firm. It doesn't always have to cost you $10,000. However, we understand that if you're looking at a $10 million grant, it may be worth it to spend the $10,000 to get that grant application as strong as it can be. And I want to make sure that you all know who the team is at NLC for the Strong Southern Communities Initiative. It is a team of us. Each of us has a state. In addition to that, we have a grant navigator who is Dr. Fred White, and we also have a data scientist. All of these resources are available to you free of cost, and we work with cities one-on-one. I am the Alabama State Consultant. So I work with every city, no matter the size, in Alabama that wants to not only pursue a grant. In addition to that, we work with you on developing an action plan and result statements for a problem that may be in your area. And we help find the resources to make sure that that action plan can come to fruition. So I want to thank you all for your time today. Of course, this is just a snippet of some of the recommendations that we have to strengthen your grant applications. If you have questions, you can definitely contact us.
Thank you, everyone. And so we just had a few questions while the mayors put their questions in the chat. What are the potholes or missteps that mayors need to avoid when applying for grants?
Well, one of the challenges that I've seen up front when we're initially meeting with cities is that the mayor is busy doing the administrative portions of his duty. And one of the potholes that I see is assembling the right team up front. And so most of the times when Dr. Smith and I are meeting with the city, we would sit down and have a conversation with the person who is kind of leading the effort with grant application. And the first thing that they'll tell us is, well, I don't have a clue of what I'm doing. They just put me in this position, and I'm just kind of working through it, and we understand that. And so that's one thing. I think there's one thing is assembling, the right team, and then establishing, priorities up front. A lot of times when we meet with cities, the first thing that they say is, well, we have an idea. Or the mayor might say, I have an idea that may have not been just worked all the way through, but I may have an idea of creating a pedestrian pathway, and that's it. And so a lot of times we had to sit down with the person who's in charge and try to extrapolate out of their mind exactly where do they want to go with this concept, if you know what I mean. And then I think the last thing is very important, is setting timelines, realistic timelines. We had situations where we had some folks that say, okay, well, we got a grant that we think we're interested in, but we got about 3 weeks, to work with it. And so the pressure is boiling already, okay? But we haven't worked through what we need to work through, so we got to do all that. And so it creates a lot of tension for everybody. And so these are things that we've kind of encountered just by meeting with cities. And so I think putting the team together, putting the right team together, putting the people in place that they need to have in place in order to address the issues, make sure that the person that you bring in has the same passion that you have. You got to have that passion. I tell people all the time, if you don't like this work, then you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. It's just a job to you. And the second thing is, like I said, you need to set your priorities, be realistic with it, and then you set your timelines. You want to add to that, Dr. Smith?
No, I think in the interest of time, we'll go ahead to
Okay.
the next question.
Okay.
So we've had conversations with some of the departments, and let's just say DOE has an application that's 138 pages. So I was like, are you guys kidding me? So I want to ask, how much lead time do you really need on any given application? And two, who should the mayor actually be putting on the grant team? Because I think that when you don't have the skill set, then you don't know who needs to be on the team.
Right.
So I'll take part of that. In terms of the timeline can be based on your capacity, but in general, that's why that funding calendar is important. If you see the funding calendar now, and you see that there's going to be a grant that's going to come out in spring 2023, you should start assembling that team now. You can actually start working on that grant application before the notice of funding comes out, because you can look at previous requirements. So at the minimum, I would say you should give yourself about 4 to 6 weeks. If you're new and you've never written a federal grant application, you may want to give yourself more time. In terms of a team, that can often depend on the area of the grant. So if you're doing an educational grant that may be highly focused on educational requirements, looking at what the grant is requiring of you, pick the person who has the most knowledge in that area. Because what you may find is that it may be easier for them to write that grant than it would be for you to pick the person that you're like, well, this person does all that kind of stuff. They're a really good writer. But if they don't have the information that's necessary to complete the grant application, they may not be the best person to put on that team. So you may want to have at least 2 or 3 people in your department across the city that you can call upon when it comes time for grants. You want to add something, Dr. White?
Oh, no, I think you covered it.
And so I know you guys are experts. So what important insights have you learned along the way about strategies to manage multiple projects? In a small city, I'm originally from Little Rock. And so I know how hard it is. And I'm a former mayor's chief of staff also. And so it's a lot to juggle. You're picking up trash, you're you're shoveling snow, you're doing it all. And now you gotta, sift through this federal grant process. And it's a lot. And so what strategies have you seen along the way that actually work?
Okay. Well, what I've seen, especially in most projects, and one that we just talked about, is getting the right people on the team, and my rule of thumb is, get people on the team that know more than what you know, and you can't be afraid to do that, because the ultimate goal is to generate dollars into the agencies, and so sometimes we get caught into that. And so we need to understand that, because there again, in my mind, the mayor's job is to do the administrative portion and not deal with that. That's number one. Number two, you got to plan accordingly. And in planning accordingly, in dealing with multiple projects, what we normally do, and Dr. Smith and I, kind of over time work with cities, we look at multiple grant applications that, say for instance, Dr. Smith and I was working with a city, and they had, and we look at those cities who have similar interests, number one, and we try to look at those NOFOs that meet the subject matter of the cities that we're looking at. And then we also carefully look at the due dates. So we won't have NOFOs stacking on each other. And so we normally do, like, I know one city we worked with, we had 3 NOFOs that were due, not at the same time, but we had one due like maybe in September, another in October, and another in November. So it was a rolling cycle with some of the same subject matter within those NOFOs. So say for instance, if somebody's working on dog catching and building a fence, that's fine. But they needed to add something else to building that fence that particular NOFO didn't do. This NOFO did, you see what I'm saying? So some of the same criteria or some of the same narrative information in the previous NOFO, we were able to use in the second NOFO. So what we're saying is sometimes when you're looking at this, you got to think smart, and you got to work smart. You know what I'm saying? So, and so we try to find like NOFOs that are out there that we can use some of the same information. So it won't be so difficult when you're looking at 3 or 4 different NOFOs that are stacked on each other, and you go from one project, you change focus, and you go to another project. So that's how we've been able to successfully work with cities managing multiple grant applications.
Yeah, and I would just add real quickly, Phyllis, you want to look across departments. When it comes to multiple NOFOs and multiple projects, where is the synergy? Because a lot of times our departments are working in silos. If it's a transportation grant, we're only sending it to the transportation people. But that transportation grant has an impact on the workforce. That transportation grant may have an impact on the education. So don't work in silos is what we have found, because we see it so often in municipalities. So make sure that your projects, they're broader than what that one topic may be, and look at all those other ways in which those grants can actually feed into one another. So you might think it's 3 projects, but it's really just one overall project that has these 3 phases.
So let's end with this question. So since I came from local government, I'm going to speak for the mayors because they probably can't say this. The staff you have sometimes, it is what it is, right?
Correct.
And sometimes people that has been there 30 years, they don't have the skill set to do this, nor the
Correct.
And so you keep telling us to hire the right team or put the right team together. But the question that most mayors have is, this is what I have, like, right? I inherited this, or this is what I can afford. And so how do you work around those type of challenges? Like where outside the box do I look? Well,
I give you this one city that we talked about that had the operating budget under 500,000. Okay, so every time we would have a meeting, we would have a meeting in her living room. Okay, and she had her cell phone, and she had, she was doing things we had to be on hold. What we realized in the whole notion of meeting them where they are, we essentially met with that mayor, we sat down with her, we did a shared screen, and we worked through whatever the process is. Because one of the things that we normally do in the NLC is that once we meet, we can determine pretty much after we had a conversation with the state navigators, especially with Dr. Smith and I, we can determine, where the strengths and weaknesses are, where they are. And so we deal with what we have to deal with. We know in the personal world that we want to have the right people in the right places. But I tell you, in the Mississippi Delta, that's not the case. If I could have that kind of conversation, we did. Sometimes I'm talking to somebody who's dealing with grants, who may work out, who may cut the grass, or whatever. So, so what we have to do is we have to go the extra step, being that we need to help them, provide the assistance that they need to provoke thought into their mind, to help them develop a subject matter, from pulling up the information and pulling it up and saying, let's carefully go through the NOFO and talk to them and spend the additional time that we need to do with them. Then we've done that before as well. So we do understand in the perfect world that you would have the necessary personnel that you would need. But in most instances, we do wind up, and then as Dr. Smith said, we work with you from beginning to end. So it's not a situation where we come in, we do a concept and say, okay, we lead this up to you. We're with you even when you're getting ready to submit the application. We are right there with you until everything is done.
And I'll add one quick note. In terms of building that team, look outside your office, look to other departments, look to community organizations. There are organizations that are getting grants in your city. Ask for assistance. Do not be afraid to ask for assistance. You may be surprised that there's a teacher at the school that happens to have grant experience. Well, you wouldn't know that unless you ask. So it often cannot hurt to look outside of your office to get that assistance to work on grant applications, because there may be a grant expert lying in the cut, getting grants for other places, but not for the city itself. So seek those types of partnerships. Grant applications are not, I will say this, they're not meant to be done alone. So seek out partnerships, and they don't always cost you money, especially if you're looking within your own city. You may find an organization that actually has somebody and is willing to just have them come on and assist. Check your colleges, check your universities. They have students that are in business programs. These are the ways that you build teams without necessarily costing you additional funds.
Perfect. So before Darian closes, I just want everyone to know all of these examples are free. So whether you're using the tool from AECOM, the Fund Explorer registration tool, or you're using Dr. Smith and Dr. White from NOC, who know how to, I always say, go low and meet you where you are, that's free also. So understand that we're trying to offer you options that are free. Darian, you want to close us out?
Yes, thank you for a wonderful presentation, Dr. White and Dr. Smith. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. We have recorded today's session and we'll make it available online. Special thanks to our partners, the Kauffman Foundation, National League of Cities, and AECOM for making today's session possible. And stay tuned for more information about our final session in March. And this concludes today's session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great session.